Right. Let us begin as soon as we are live. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we should be live at the moment. If you can see me, scream loudly. If you cannot, then refresh, I guess. What's good, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to each and every one of you to a brand new week. And of course, as new weeks go, there's almost always something new to discuss. I trust and I pray that all of you had a wonderful Easter weekend, whether you went to church or whether you just stayed home, hung out with family. I really hope that it was a blessed time for all of you. I myself had a full weekend of church on Friday, singing in the choir. Then on Saturday, I had a group, like a braai with a bunch of friends. And then yesterday, church and choir. And then also another braai with a group of friends. Well, actually on Sunday, another braai with a group of friends. And then yesterday, I genuinely just needed to sort of recharge my battery. So I was basically yesterday just doing nothing. Normally, even on weekends when I'm not really officially making videos, I'm researching, reading. I have all sorts of books that I'm constantly reading. But yesterday it was genuinely just like, okay, nothing today. I'm just doing nothing. I just need to recharge batteries and get back up and running. So I hope that you guys had a wonderful time. Rivi, how you doing, sir? Boshi, how you doing? I hope you guys are very well. I'm gonna start today with what I guess is a bit of an explanation. If you follow me on X, if you have the misfortune of following me on X, you would have seen that I haven't been posting for about the last 24, almost 48 hours now, because I've been banned or suspended, at least on X. So I had a full show planned for all of you today, with like everything that I find on X, which is one of my favorite places to do research, because it is one of the few places in South Africa where people give their unvarnished and unfurnished thoughts about other people in the country. It's specifically a nice place to go if you want to see just how racist a lot of the freedom fighters in South Africa are. And by freedom fighters, of course, not just referring to the EFF, but also some of the ANC members and the MK members and so on and so forth. All of those posts are currently on my X account, so I can't get to them. And why was I suspended on X? Well, I was suspended because I retweeted a tweet from the Iranian embassy to South Africa, where the Iranian embassy to South Africa said that President Trump is the most hateful man or most hated man in the world, and that many people are wishing for his downfall. I replied and said, I promise you far more people are wishing for your demise than his. There is no violence being called for in this post. I am not directing anyone to go attack Iran. I am not directing anyone to take action against Iranian leadership. I am merely saying and stating the fact that when it comes down to a choice between literally almost anyone and the Iranian regime, I think more people, at least decent people, have a problem with a regime that kills consistently, pretty much every single year, tens of thousands of their own people, right? That is a problem. And I think that is a problem that we should be dealing with. And I salute the Americans for actually taking up this cause. Yes, it's causing a lot of discomfort at the pumps. Yes, it's going to probably take the world economy quite a long time to actually recover from this. But fundamentally, you just have to sometimes take the pain so as to get rid of a very evil regime. Now, I could just delete the post and then my account would be restored, but I'm a stubborn little bastard. And so I decided I will not delete the post. I will just write this out. Now, ordinarily, I will wait 3 or 4 days because the X system takes so long to actually get this stuff fixed that after 3 or 4 days, I have to get back to work. And so I'll just delete the post anyways. So it's not like I'm like fully standing on principle here. But every single time, I hope that there will be some kind of an appeal made. Miro, thank you so much for the €2. I really appreciate you, sir. Thank you. You're far too kind. So for me, at least, this is something that I care about. This is something that I feel strongly about. I hate the Iranian regime. I hate what they are doing to their own people. And as a result of that, I hope that they do see the end of that regime sooner rather than later. One of my big gripes, and this is really something that I just want to sort of vent about for a little bit before we get into the actual topics, because I know all of the topics I want to discuss with you guys today. So don't worry, we're still going to be having those conversations. I'm just not going to be able to show you what I'm talking about. So you'll just have to take my word for it or go over to my X, which is in the description down below, and just check it out for yourselves, because all of the evidence is on my X profile. But fundamentally, just a little bit of venting here. The X system currently is completely broken. Now, before we get going, very quick, I don't make money on X. If you're a South African content creator, it is impossible for you to make money on X. First, you need about, I think, 3,000 followers on your X account to even begin to qualify for the monetization over on X. But more importantly, X makes all of its payouts through Stripe. Stripe is blocked in South Africa. We physically cannot make Stripe accounts in South Africa, at least last time I checked. You can't make an account on Stripe. I didn't want to make an account for X. I wanted to make an account for Kick, but the same applies, right? Stripe doesn't have access here in South Africa. And so as a result of that, even if I were to have 3,000, I think I'm like 100 and maybe not even 100. Maybe I'm like 80 followers away from getting 3,000 followers on X. But even if I had that, I can't monetize myself on X, nor would I actually even care, because I don't post on X to make money. Every single post that I make on X is a post for a video or a live stream. That's what I do, right? I just use my profile as research for videos, among with like notepads and Word documents that I have for things that isn't on X. So fundamentally, I'm not monetized. What I hate about the X system currently is how easy it is to abuse. So for those of you who might wonder, why were you banned on X? Well, or were you suspended on X? The way it works with the left, at least, is they have lists and groups set up specifically to mass report posts that they do not like. The Iranian regime first posted about the downfall of President Trump. For some reason, it is okay for an embassy and an embassy staff member to wish violence upon the sitting president of the United States of America, but it is not okay for me to point out that, by the way, more people want you to see the end of your regime rather than see President Trump be removed from office or President Trump losing his life. Apparently, that is my post is far more contentious than theirs, because last time I checked, their post is still up. I can't get into my X, but I asked someone to quickly check, and their post is still up. So clearly, they were not banned or suspended from X. So when you get enough leftists to report your post, you will get automatically suspended, and then you have to appeal and go through a human system. The issue there is there's literally no punishment for these leftists when they go on these mass violation sprees where they just report accounts. So my thinking is, if Elon Musk would ever watch this video or watch this stream, Elon, you need to get a punishment in place for people who abuse the reporting system, because this sort of it's a similar argument to rape, right? And people who falsely accuse others of rape. Was a big thing during the Me Too movement, but it's still a big thing today. If you think about just the accusation of rape, and you think of the number of people, men specifically, who has had their lives destroyed as a result of just being accused. So these are not men that are guilty of actually committing the crime. They were just accused of committing the crime. And as a result of that accusation, they lost their jobs. You have young people who lost their positions at university, who were found guilty by the university without any real trial ever actually taking place, purely based on the idea of, believe or trust the victim or believe women. This is, in my opinion, similar to that. In the same way that someone who reports someone falsely for the crime of rape, that person should get the punishment that person would have gotten were they guilty of it. In the same vein, I feel like if you report people on social media with no actual evidence and this person didn't in fact break the law or break the rules of the platform, that person's account should be banned. Or at least should be suspended for a week or two. But this never happens. And so effectively, X has allowed the exact same problem that it persisted on Twitter, where you had these leftists banding together and effectively banning everyone that said things that they did not agree with. This is still in effect. You have to, every single time you post on X, you have to go through this little bit of a mental exercise where you ask yourself, am I going to be banned for this? Is there an opportunity for them to actually, report me for this? And since it is an automated system, literally you could be saying hello, and the automated system would just suspend your account if enough people reported that account. And the appeal, as I said, I have waited days, and that appeal never actually gets seen by a human, to the point where you just eventually have to cancel the post. So effectively, everyone else goes through this system of self-censorship, which is still a form of censorship. Just because you say, and this is something that happens in the UK quite often nowadays, where the UK will say, well, we have freedom of speech. You are allowed to say whatever it is you want, but you are not free from the consequences of saying the things that you want. Well, if you're not free from the consequences by the government, of course, now no one can take away the consequences of society, right? If you say something completely vile, racist, and evil, then other people have the right to go, well, we don't want to associate with you. Your job, your business has the right to go, well, you're a bit of a crazy person. We're just going to ignore you from now, or we're going to fire you. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing you can do about that. But when the government sends the police to your door to take action against something that you said, there's no freedom of speech, because now people are starting to self-censor. Instead of saying the thing, they'll instead try and say it another way. This is the same thing, and I will soon have a pastor on to actually talk about the ANC's attempts at trying to capture religion and force churches to preach what the ANC deems good. So for those of you who don't quite understand what I'm talking about, in China, and this is really the model that the ANC wants to follow, in China, you're allowed to have churches. In fact, the Chinese CCP set up state churches for pretty much every religion in China. But they have a couple of requirements if you are going to be a church in China, and that is that you must at all times preach that the CCP is good. Right? You have to stick to the party lines. You cannot criticize the regime. You cannot criticize the actions of the regime. You have to, what they call, preach social and racial unity or ethnic unity within China. The way that works is the ruling party, their culture, because China is actually made up of about 53 different cultures that all exist within the greater borders of China. And the Chinese CCP has been spending a lot of effort trying to remove every other cultural group from China and ultimately have the Han culture or the Han ethnicity be the main one. And then every other one will just believe that they are Han too. So they want all Chinese people who are not actually one group to be one group. And churches have to abide by this. And the way they would do it is you also have all of these government rules that says what you can and cannot do. And every once in a while, there will be people from the government that show up at your church unannounced to listen to what you're preaching. Now, the South African government wants to do something similar. My pastor actually knows a guy who preaches in one of these churches in China, and he says it's nice because it's so easy to spot. You just suddenly have a bunch of faces you've never seen in the church before in black suits and black sunglasses. Some of them wear black sunglasses, but they're all dressed in black suits. And you just go, wow, clearly, you're not supposed to be here. And so then on those days, you have to be very careful with what it is that you're going to be preaching. So fundamentally, it's sort of a similar problem, right? Self-censorship is a huge issue. And it's something that I despise that it exists. And I despise the left for consistently finding ways of poisoning the social media platforms that is supposed to be the new town square where we can discuss very difficult topics. like the topics that we're going to be discussing today. Anyway, so I wanted to get that off my chest. Just a bit of venting. I apologize to all of you that had to sit here and listen to me do that. But, every once in a while, you just have to let go and be like, man, I'm sick and tired of this nonsense. Mainties, how you doing, sir? All those people who can now openly worship Jesus without being killed, and that's how things work. Becky, what do you mean? Yes, if you tell the truth, it's never right. Everything is now turned upside down. Right is changed to wrong, and wrong is now right. Well, yes, but this is this is how governments around the world operate, and it is something that will continue to happen. And I believe that at some point, it's going to get a lot worse. And we'll actually talk about some of that in today's stream. All those people who can now, we live in grace. The day that Christ returns will be a great day. True, Noctem, very, very true. When people come to a church unannounced in South Africa, they usually come with AKs. 140. Luckily, that doesn't happen that often here, right? If we're going to be very honest, there's been a couple of severe church shootings in the history of South Africa, but in the modern era, we are blessed that that doesn't happen all the time or even happens often, which I think is actually going to change. We're starting to see some interesting things happen here in South Africa. We're starting to see a worrying trend of increased farm murders, right, in South Africa, which I quite honestly, I don't think anyone is surprised, right? Looking at the stats, there seems to be, and this is something that has bothered me and I think anyone else with eyes for a long time. For example, one of the most peaceful periods to be a farmer ever in the history of the new South Africa was during the 2010 World Cup, where suddenly, for about a month, not a single farm murder took place. And one has to wonder, how does that actually work? Like, if these farm murders were just random murders, that should not happen. And then more importantly, we see a trend of farm murders being spaced out quite significantly, where you'll only get a couple of farm attacks every single week. It won't be rising to the level where everyone can spot a serious sort of a structure to it or a serious pattern to it. And then with President Trump putting South Africa under the microscope for the things that is currently taking place here in South Africa, the persecution of Afrikaners and the anger that appears to be rising out of this, suddenly for the last few months, we have started to see a very sharp increase in the number of farm murders in South Africa perpetrated by the black majority on the white minority. And specifically, when you look at the farm numbers, right, it is insane. You look at Willem Petzer's video. Now, I've made videos on this. Willem Petzer is only the most recent video on this. But when you actually look at the likelihood of being murdered, and you see that Afrikaners are 12 times more likely to be murdered than any other race on farms, that's worrying, right? Because at that point, every single person has to be able to admit to themselves there's something very wrong here. If it was, in fact, just rural violence and it was just people being murderers, you would see the majority of people who live out in the rural areas, meaning black people, would be a lot higher in terms of how they die compared to their white compatriots, especially when you consider that, I don't know how many of you have ever been on a farm owned by a white person, but the vast majority of those farmhouses are like prisons. The outside of it is completely fenced. They have a fence, they have electric fencing at the top as well as on the other side, making it even harder for people to get in. Most farmers now have motion sensor or motion activated cameras and alarm systems. Their houses are completely barred all the way around. Every single window has bars in front of it. They have dogs to keep them awake. So from just a pure, I want to go out and I want to murder a bunch of people, this is not the most likely target, right? If you're just a murderer, and you see this with most serial killers, they will go after vulnerable groups, right? They'll go after easy targets because, well, I just want to kill people. I don't really have a problem with who I'm killing. So if you have these two groups, One group lives in shacks, either on the farm or in one of the townships close to the farm. No security, no dogs, no guns, no weapons, nothing. It's a low risk target. You can take that target out, and the way the police system works in South Africa, you may not ever even have to deal with a police investigation there, but because it just sort of will go unanswered and the police won't even care, versus attacking a farm that is like a prison where you have to break through multiple lines of defense and then deal with a potentially armed farmer on the other side. And that's still 12 times more likely to occur than actually just the normal farm workers and the normal people in the townships. That tells you that there is a targeted session in the works here. Someone is targeting these farms and these farmers and wanting to get rid of them systematically. The fact that it's now being increased plays into one of the scenarios that I laid out for you guys a couple of months ago, where I said that things are going to get worse in this country. And we see it now with farm murders. We see it with Section 235 of the Constitution and at least the attempt to repeal Section 235. Why? Because fundamentally, the ANC does not want to lose their favorite scapegoat, but also their favorite sort of object of punishment. One of the things that today's talk is going to be about is the Rainbow Nation. But one of the things that I sort of want to drive home is that I don't believe that South Africa was ever a rainbow nation. I don't believe that there was ever an attempt to even establish a rainbow nation, as fatal and as failed as that would have been, even if it was to be like an actual attempt. Like, even if the ANC really wanted to set up a rainbow nation, it would have failed, and we'll go into all of that in a second. But I don't believe that that was ever really the attempt. I believe the attempt from day one was the punishment of white people done in such a way that the ANC doesn't ruin their country, right? Because the ANC could see what happened to countries like Rwanda. The ANC could see what happened to countries that violently got rid of one ethnic group. These countries would become pariahs on the international stage. These countries would suddenly find themselves in severe sanctions. The world would take a long time to forgive that. And even the leftist governments of the world that hate white people, if the ANC just started killing white people and jailing white people left, right, and center, even those governments would have to be like, whoa, boys, come on. We get that you guys want to punish white people, and that's perfectly fine, but you have to do it in such a way that there's plausible deniability, which is sort of the unspoken rule in almost every government when it comes to corruption, right? Even first world nations have this unspoken rule. You can be corrupt and you can steal money from the public purse, provided you don't get caught. And don't do it too much. Just here in South Africa, where it's like, well, take whatever you can, and if you get caught, nothing will happen to you. But ultimately, this will increase. I genuinely believe that we are going to see an increased attack on minorities in this country. I believe that there's going to be an increase in the attack on the ordinary citizens of this country, and it is coming from every single angle. You look at SARS and you look at the current state of SARS, the ANC is ramping up steadily their choking of the economically active portions of South Africa. So this would be in the majority white people, but not just white people. It would also include people that are colored, people that are Indian, even people who are black, who don't buy into the victimhood mindset and who don't believe that everyone should just give them stuff. Even those people will be a target for this government, because the idea is to squeeze at every single angle, to allow zero room where you can feel some form of a reprieve, where there is some kind of way for you to just let off steam. And hopefully you leave, or if you don't leave, they'll just find a way to either enslave you, kill you, or force you to submit, which is usually what the ANC wants, but that's something we'll talk about as soon as we start talking about today's main topic. But yeah, I think I'm keeping an eye out, but I do think that we're gonna see. I don't know if you guys saw just this was also on X, but Sunrail and the road agency of South Africa are tabling a new draft of laws that will govern service stations around this country, and very specifically, one of the ones that they're looking into, at least the last time I checked, this was not an April Fool's, this was not some big hoax, this is actually what they're planning. Um, they want to force service stations to effectively BEE. All right. So if it is a white guy owning the service station, that white guy will have to sell a big part of his service station to a black conglomerate of some kind, because equality and all the rest of it. So this is just going to move further and further in that direction. And I think they're going to get more and more aggressive, especially with how President Trump has brought South Africa into the mainstream. You now have France that have uninvited South Africa from the G7, which already signals to you that a lot more than just America are starting to look at South Africa and saying, look, maybe this is not the best partner for us here in Africa. And then you have the Human Rights Commission, the UN Human Rights Commission, that just ruled against the South African government in the Boeremark case. Another case that I don't know if you guys even know, but the Boeremark, at least 3 of the members of the Boeremark, was just awarded a massive victory by the Human Rights Commission for effectively the South African government violating their human rights, which puts even more pressure on the South African government now. And I do believe that this is, again, just going to continue. And as the pressure increases, they're going to pass that pressure down to the whites and the minorities in South Africa, because ultimately what the ANC wants is either all rebellious white people dead or out of the country, or all white people submitting to what they would consider to be the revolution. So this is this is clear in language, like, for example, Vakile Mbulula, who posted over the Easter period that he was brought up as a Christian with pastor parents. Don't know exactly what that means. Mom and dad is a pastor, or how does that work? And he loves every South African with a revolutionary love. That, of course, means I love everyone that is part of the communist revolution, and I don't love anyone else. That's what Fikile Mbulula was saying. But the ANC has been they've been busy over the Easter period. Again, something we'll talk about in a bit. So, boss, how are you doing, sir? Is Afrikaner expat year? I have been living and working in China since 2018 as an English teacher. It was the only way for me to support myself and also help my family with urgent financial situations. I know quite a few people like that, Boss. People who had to leave South Africa because there really was just no other way. There was nothing else that they could potentially do, right? So you're definitely not the only one there. Aren't these just more wealthy extraction mechanisms? So DNX, South Africa and specifically the ANC is really caught between not caught between a rock and a hard place, but the ANC is effectively, and this is maybe one of the only things that is currently saving South Africa, is that there's 2 ideologies within the ANC that is tearing the ANC apart. The ideology 1 is the punishment of white people and the establishment of a pan-African identity. So this would be the idea, and this is why the ANC is so incredibly opposed to enforcing the borders of South Africa, even though there is already 27, if you don't count all of the workers of the government, 30 million if you do count all of the workers of the government, but there are 30 million parasites living in South Africa who contribute nothing to the country and extracts about 99% of all of the resources of the country. So this is already a problem. And the ANC refuses to enforce the border, which means that there are just more and more millions of people being added to this parasitic class that feeds off of the system and extract whatever wealth may or may not have been created, because they're hoping for this pan-Africanist revolution where all of Africa effectively becomes the United States of Africa or the United Nations of Africa, where it's one government, much like the EU or like the United States. So that's the one faction. The other faction, they just want to get rich. They don't really care about all of this nonsense about Pan-Africanism or whatever. They just want to get rich. And as a result of this, the Pan-Africanists have to constantly negotiate with the looters to find a way to coexist, to find a way to keep everyone happy. This is why you will continuously see things like the Madlanga Commission, like the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, where people will be found guilty and they'll be absolutely guilty, and yet they will continue their work in whichever way they did. You look at Senzu Mukunu, who, if you listen to the Madlanga Commission, if you listen to the Ad Hoc Committee, this man is guilty as sin. Right? Like, not even just, it's not even as if there's questions about his guilt. He is guilty as sin, and yet he just went back to work for the ANC. He just got his position on the NEC back, one of the big shots within the ANC. And you ask yourself, wait, didn't you guys say that anyone who is suspected of corruption must step aside? Anyone who is politically convenient for the ANC must be forced to step aside. But those who are in the upper echelons, those who know where the bodies are buried, they will never be forced to step aside. And that's really the thing that is keeping the ANC from truly coming to fruition with all of their plans and their evil schemes for the minorities of South Africa, because they have to constantly balance out these groups, if you will. Interesting nonetheless. But okay, so let's get to the discussion that I wanted to have today. The Rainbow Nation, the big dream that was sold to all of us in 1994. The one concept that seemingly is only held alive in this country by white leftists. And not even all white leftists. I guess in this instance, I should actually say by white liberals. This is not a concept that is shared by the majority of black voters in this country who support the freedom fighters. That would include the ANC, the EFF, as well as the MK. This is a concept only held alive by the DA. They seem to be the only party in South Africa that bought into this idea of a rainbow nation. And they seem to be the only ones actually carrying the torch for this. This is why the DA will consistently stand against things like federalization in South Africa, even though they are officially for federalization in South Africa. You'll notice how they've been in the GNU for a while now, and they have never even raised the option of federalization. This is just not a topic that they currently discuss, and that is because for the DA playing politics, they had to look and see that there is a sizable amount of South Africans that want Cape independence. That is something that the DA will never actually accept. And so they had to come up with a way to get their own base, to not abandon them, and that was where federalization was born. They knew that they didn't actually want to federalize, but they wanted to federalize enough to actually tell the people, don't go to the Cape independence movement, we'll give you your independence at some point through federalization, which will not happen, but it keeps the masses happy, at least in the short term. So the DA is the only ones who actually bought into the Rainbow Nation. And the reason I believe the Rainbow Nation was a lie isn't just based on, well, we can see that there is no Rainbow Nation, but more importantly, you have to go back and look at Nelson Mandela and realize that there were forces in play when Nelson Mandela came to power that made a lot of the decisions that Nelson Mandela made not make sense, unless you view it through a different lens. Now, Nelson Mandela's history is an interesting one, and that we have made videos on this, we have discussed this, but Nelson Mandela was the founder and one of the most loyal supporters of the MK, the armed wing of the ANC. Nelson Mandela himself planted an innumerable amount of bombs. These were bombs targeting specifically civilians, so the argument that we were in an armed conflict with the armed forces of South Africa does not apply here. Because if you're planting bombs and car bombs in unsuspecting civilians' cars, if you're bombing bars and shopping malls and the like, if you're bombing churches, this is not armed conflict. This is terrorism. Nelson Mandela was the mastermind behind this movement. When Nelson Mandela went to jail, his ex-wife, Winnie Mandela, actually continued on his orders. We have reason to believe that he was still running the show even though he was in prison. And fundamentally, this allowed, the ANC to do things like necklacing, the ANC to continue to bomb and murder, and ultimately, in the late 80s, the MK, or actually middle 80s, the MK would come up with what we still deal with today, which is the murder of farmers, because their idea was we'll kill them from the outside in. First, we'll take the whole of the country, sort of secluding them in their cities, and then we'll rush the cities and we'll kill all of them inside the cities. This is a man that hated white people. He sang consistently, and there are videos about him singing, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer." There are videos of him killing about one settler, one bullet. Clearly, this is a man that despised white people, and yet, in 1994, Nelson Mandela comes to power, and suddenly he's mellowed out. He's completely turned around. He has a new plan of action now. The plan now is for peace, for South Africans to be reunited, and for there to be a period of reconciliation in the country. And everyone sort of believes him, right? He's the first person to coin the term Rainbow Nation. And the Rainbow Nation is an idea that then gets picked up quite heavily by white liberals. But you will notice that the idea of the Rainbow Nation is never actually picked up by the ANC. The ANC continues to pass laws, albeit slowly at first, to push ahead, shall we say, with a different agenda. Now, the agenda, in order to understand the agenda, you have to understand a little bit about the history of the ANC and what the ANC specifically is. So the ANC, even in their own documents, so if you go to the National Development Plans, the NDPs that they write up, and the National Revolution or the Democratic Revolution documents that they draw up, which is their intellectual framework, if you go to 1997 and you read the National Democratic Revolution documents, the ANC is very careful to never label themselves as a communist or a socialist movement. The ANC is a movement for the workers, by the workers, that contain within it communists and socialists. But even in that document, the ANC describes itself as a big tent. And in this tent, they have unions. In this tent, they have communists. In this tent, they have socialists. And they even say that eventually they will have capitalists in this tent. Now, this entire idea is actually dreamt up by a man called Joe Slovo, arguably the most intelligent man that has ever been a part of the ANC. Joe Slovo isn't an intelligent man by objective standards, but as a terrorist, as well as a communist, the man's a legend, right? A regular Einstein, if you will. Because Joe Slovo, being born in the Soviet Union and being part of the Soviet Union, he notices a couple of issues within the Soviet Union. One of them is that if you label yourself as a thing, it's easy to attack that thing. The Soviet Union was labeled as communist by themselves, and so the rest of the world could look at the Soviet Union and say, hell to the no, we don't want any part of that. And that made the Soviet Union an enemy of all countries that don't want to be communist. And so when he comes to South Africa and he establishes the ANC, or at least helps to, I guess, formalize the ANC, because the ANC is established in 1920 something, somewhere in the 1920s. I can't remember, 22 or something. But it's really when Joe Slovo comes around that the ANC becomes a proper political vehicle. Before this, the ANC is sort of involved and very unorganized in their sort of opposition to the National Party and to the white people in South Africa. But Joe Slovo understands this, and so he establishes this big tent. But the big tent is sort of littered with communist memorabilia, if you will. The language, for example, we're not a thing. We're not communist or socialist, but we are a party that advances the rights and the emancipation of the worker. That's just another way of saying we're communists without saying we're communists, right? And so the big taint allowed for the ANC to enjoy a certain sense of untargetableness, if I can put it that way. It made them immune to criticism because you couldn't really call them communists because they would just say, we're not communists. Yes, we have communists in our party, but we are not communists. And specifically, when you look at their greatest weapon, it was the Constitution. Because this allowed them to call themselves constitutionalists. And it's very specifically in the way they read the Constitution of South Africa. So the Constitution of South Africa makes a number of fundamental mistakes, which makes it, in my opinion, one of the worst constitutions even in the history of the world. And that is because the Constitution of South Africa says that every single person has the right to dignity. This is in the Constitution of South Africa. It also goes further to state that every single person in South Africa belongs to all who live in it. These two clauses of the Constitution would ultimately be the bedrock upon which the ANC builds their oppressive regime. You see, because if I tell you that all people have the right to dignity, that might sound good to you, but the question would immediately be, well, what do you determine as dignity? What does dignity look like to you? See, the problem is if you look at the American Constitution, it says that all men should have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What that means is that you must have the access, not the means, right? It doesn't mean that you can have the house, but it does mean that you have the right to pursue building the house. The way the South African Constitution is set up is if the government determines that dignity means that you should get a paycheck from the government every single month, it means that you should get a house from the government for free, and it means that you should get a farm from the government for free, then that is being a constitutionalist. You as government are merely doing what the constitution of your country requires. So you're not expropriating land without compensation. You're expropriating land with nil compensation so that you can satisfy the demands of the Constitution upon the government. Because all people have a right to dignity. And dignity is then defined as having a farm, or as having a business, or as having all manner of things dependent on what the government wants. Effectively, this allows the government of South Africa to set up a system where, as George Orwell in Animal Farm, very good book, if you have not read it already, really, really could not recommend higher, explain all animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And this is really where South Africa is, right? We're all equal, but some are more equal than others. But as a result of this big taint, there is another element to this that comes into play for the ANC, and that's Islamism. The ANC has had a very notorious history with Islamists and Muslim governments throughout history. And one of the things throughout its history, I should say, and one of the things that it got from these Islamists is the idea of submission. One of the things that Muslims will often tell you is that we don't mind sharing a country with Jews and Christians. What they don't tell you is that Jews and Christians are allowed to live in Islamic countries provided that they submit to Islam. So they have to pay money, exorbitant taxes, and then eventually they will just get killed. This is something that the ANC borrowed from the Islamists. And that is why you're seeing this sort of two-tier system that exists in South Africa and why the ANC sees no problem with it. You as a white person or as a brown person, really I should say you as a conservative, is allowed to live in South Africa, provided that you submit to the government. And so you can live here, but you must submit to the communist revolution. If you do not, you are not allowed to be here. So that's the first part of it. You need to understand the Rainbow Nation was always just a phrase. It didn't actually exist. So where did it come from? Well, this is where it gets really tricky because funding of political parties in South Africa is contentious at best. We know who are some of the funders of some of the parties in South Africa, but there are a myriad of loopholes that allow people to fund different political parties without ever having their names published anywhere. So that creates a serious problem, and the ANC has literally blocked every attempt to open up the funding debates in South Africa so that we just genuinely don't know. But we can look at what the world has done and the direction that the world has gone in to understand who actually stood behind Nelson Mandela. The globalists, the World Economic Forum. Around the world, every single country started to tout the same lines. The Rainbow Nation was the first iteration of a phrase that every single one of you in chat will know off by heart. Diversity is our strength. The Rainbow Nation is just another way of saying diversity is our strength. If you look around the world for the last decade and a half, every single world leader has touted that line consistently at the demise of their own countries. As Germany and Europe is overrun by migrants that are raping their women, that are destroying their cultures, ripping their cities apart, the leaders of those countries are screaming, diversity is our strength, the Rainbow Nation. This also explains to you why the ANC has a 3-decade track record of taking the aid from Western countries, taking the investments from Western countries, and then squandering it. A Western country will make an investment in South Africa for 5 billion euros, and that money will disappear and make no dent to the South African economy. The South African economy will not even make a blip in terms of growth. One would think that 5 billion euros or 5 million euros being invested in South Africa would at least have some effect on the economy, but it has no effect. And yet, every single year, millions and millions of dollars and euros keep flowing into South Africa. And not a single country asks the question, what the hell are you guys doing with our money? Why is your economy consistently failing? Instead, what you hear from leaders, Barack Obama was one of the first to praise the South African government for the Rainbow Nation. You had Angela Merkel praising the South African government and the Rainbow Nation. You had Tony Blair praising South Africa and the Rainbow Nation. You had Keir Starmer, I believe, had an entire speech where a portion of that was actually from, South Africa. Barack Obama, in a very recent speech at Jesse Jackson's funeral, took a part of the ANC sort of constitution and preached that, right, to the audience, speaking about the brilliance of South Africa. Why? South Africa was the test case. South Africa was supposed to be the first. The beginnings of the unseating of Western hegemony. You guys have heard of the Great Replacement Theory. The idea that white people are being replaced across the world in every single country. And I wouldn't say that I'm an absolute believer in that theory, because I do think that there are other explanations for why the world leaders are doing the things that they're doing, because the Great Replacement Theory insists that this is to replace white people. I can think of a number of other reasons why this could potentially happen. The one thing that I will say is that regardless of what the reasons are, the effect is the same. Across the world, in every single historically white country, white people are becoming minorities in their own cities. You start to look at all of these big European cities, and time and again, my brother, I told you guys, my brother went to Europe about 2 or 3 months ago. And when he got to France, when he landed at the airport in France, there were 2 sets of languages at the airport. One is French, the other is Chinese. And what he found very interesting, English was not one of the two languages, even though English is the business language of the world, but French and Chinese were the two languages on there. But what he found really interesting was he sat on that airport for a few hours, and the only people he ever saw were Muslims from the Middle East. Not a single white person. Just Middle Eastern people flooding into France. And he genuinely thought, how is this Europe? Right? Like, you can understand that if you're going to the Middle East, but you're in Europe. You're in the capital city of France, right? You're in Paris, and yet you don't see white people. You're just seeing people from other countries. This is a problem, right? It's a significant problem. And South Africa was the first. It was supposed to be the poster child for this new one world government. And that really is what I think was the plan. The plan wasn't to replace white people. The plan wasn't to, make white people extinct. The plan was to ultimately bring the entire world together and then through that establish a world government where this one government rules all of the nations. Because if all the nations are together and all the nations are just sharing, what's the point? What does it matter? Fundamentally, this has some flaws, and you actually start to see these flaws when you just look at the decisions that people make. And this is something, I'll just give a little bit of an aside here, but something I find super interesting. Even when you go to the most leftist places in America, I'm talking California, New York, you go to actors in Hollywood. How many interracial couples do you actually see? The answer is very few. From what I can tell, it appears as if most people, black, white, Chinese, Indian, doesn't matter who you are, most people stick to their own. Even in super left-wing places, most people stick to their own. It appears to be about a 90-10 split, at least all the evidence that I've seen, all the information and the research that I've seen, and this is not a topic that is researched often because, uncomfortable questions must not be asked at university apparently anymore. But all the research that I have seen on this, it appears to be about a 90-10 split. About 10% of people of a given race will actually intermingle with other races, so get married, to someone that's black or, someone that's Asian or whatever the case may be. But 90% of a race just does its own thing to its own people, sort of sticking to itself. So this is sort of biologically very interesting, and I think biologically there's a reason why you want at least 10% of your population to cross the racial boundaries, because it does strengthen the gene pool. It allows for, sort of good genes to be carried forward and be brought into the genetic pool of a specific given race. So there's some good things about that, but it's interesting to me that most people stick to their own. So these guys were always going to have a problem. And the biggest problem that they were going to have, and this is where we get to South Africa and why the Rainbow Nation has failed entirely. And that is culture. Now, I'm going to ask all of you a very difficult question. What is culture? It is a difficult question. Trust me. It's a super, super difficult question. Because when you think about it, if I asked you, what is the culture of the Afrikaner? You're going to struggle, because you're immediately going to think, well, we like to braai. We like rugby. We like going to the bar on a Friday night and drinking beer. It's difficult to think about, right? It's difficult to really ask yourself and answer the question, what is the culture of Afrikaners? And the reason it's so difficult is because culture is an automatic system upon which decisions are made that you and I don't even think about on a day-to-day basis. Culture is, in fact, not watching rugby or having a braai or going to the bar on a Friday night. That's not culture. That can be cultural activities, but that's not culture. Culture is something as silly as greeting people when they pass you. So I have friends who went to America and they lived there for about 8 years. And I asked them, what's something that stood out to you as a difference between Americans and South Africans? And they had two examples. The first was when they walked. So when they go for a walk, say through the park, Americans just walk. They don't greet. They don't say hello. If you say hello to them, they'll sort of look at you weirdly, like, what the hell? And they'll just sort of walk on because they don't know you. Who the hell are you to say hello to me? I don't know you. Why are you greeting me? So Americans have that sort of, I'll greet you if I know you. If I don't know you, I'm not greeting you. And the other thing they noticed was that Americans don't really do the whole walking out with their guests. Here in South Africa, you have guests coming over. You have a braai at the end of the night. You and your wife walk them out to their car. They get in the car and they drive off. This is sort of how we do it, right? They don't do that. So their thing is, as soon as you've finished eating, maybe you had a cup of coffee, they'll just get up and they'll leave, close the door behind them, and out they go. Because we've had our dinner, right? This is good. Even at a barbecue, the way they have their barbecue is completely different. One guy will stand outside and actually barbecue the meat while everyone else is inside just talking. He brings in the food, they eat, and you leave. Here, that would be considered a very bad braai. Like, the whole point is man makes fire, man stands around the fire, look at the fire, talk shop, and all the rest of it. Then man puts meat on fire, and the women do whatever the hell they do in the kitchen, and then we eat, right? That's the point of a braai. There must be fire, and all the men is around the fire. For them, a barbecue is just another way of preparing the meal. There's no real camaraderie that comes around with that. I realize that this is different from state to state, and there might be people here listening that's going, dude, what the hell are you talking about? I'm from Texas, and we do cookouts, like nobody's business. We do it exactly the same way. But a lot of places, at least the places where they were, that's how it worked. These are all cultural things that you and I never even think about. Because here in South Africa, I go to the beach every morning of my life for about 15 to 20 minutes off the gym. Just grab a coffee and, there I go. And every morning I will say hello to 20, 25, 30 people. As they're jogging past, they'll go, hello, hello, and off they go. I don't know them. I don't know who they are, but I greet them because that's the nice thing to do. So what is culture? What is it? Well, the best example or the best definition that I have found for it is not actually my own. It's from the American sociologist Daniel Bell. And he had it as follows, and I quote, culture is modalities of response or models of response by sentient men to the core questions that confront all human groups in the consciousness of existence. Now, for those of you who might not fully follow what he said there, and he is a sociologist, so they always try to make themselves seem smarter than what they actually are. But in this case, he is actually incredibly intelligent here. Culture is the blueprint with which you and I respond to the world around us. So when a problem arises, the culture is going to determine how we fix that problem, how we tackle the problem in front of us. A great example of culture in action and why it's so difficult to define what culture actually means is this morning. This morning, my brother and I go to Bootleggers. Now, those of you who have never been to Bootleggers, just before 8 o'clock, Bootleggers has a special 29 Rand for any coffee. So it doesn't matter the size, it's 29 bucks, which is a pretty good deal, right? And Bootleggers has an app. Every single time you get your coffee, you get your slip, there's a QR code at the bottom. You scan the QR code with your phone, and you get a free coffee after 10 of these scans, plus a cash amount. So we arrive about 2 minutes after 8. We went a bit long at the gym. So the special has already lapsed, but it doesn't matter because I still want my coffee. So I order my coffee. The guy who rings up the coffee has a bit of a brain melt. I'm not entirely sure how this happens, but it happens. And he rings up my coffee and my brother's coffee on my bowl, and then he tries to fix it, but he does the exact same thing in my brother's bowl. So he brings two bowls with way too much coffee on it. He still just charges me for what I have, but I have this bowl now that I can scan that gives me two coffees rather than one. Before I even have an opportunity to tell this guy that this is happening, because when I scanned it, I saw I got two free coffees rather than just one. My brother says, by the way, this just gave me two free coffees. That's culture. The idea that I just got something that I don't deserve, that's a cultural response. In a different culture, that would not even register. In a different culture, the idea would simply be, oh, I just got a free coffee. I'm not going to say anything. Maybe they take it away from me. But that's something that's been ingrained in me as a child. It's been laid down, right? Why don't you steal the bike that lies in your neighbor's yard? Culture. You don't even ask. You don't even think. It's just not something that appeals to you. Different cultures have different limits to the things that they're allowed to do. And that is why the South African system would always have failed. Because we were trying to build a nation with a rainbow of cultures. Cultures where the core answers to the fundamental questions is different. So you look, for example, at how a lot of black people look at the corruption that is happening in South Africa. And one of the things that you'll find very often is that a lot of the black people that I have spoken to, their problem isn't the corruption. If they were also making money, they'd be perfectly happy to accept the corruption. Because from their perspective, he's the president, he must have money, right? He's allowed to make money. So from his perspective, the problem isn't the fact that he's stealing money from the system. That's fine. He's the president. He's allowed to do that. Their problem is that they don't have money. So if the government was actually doing at least some of its job and the economy was growing and everyone was making money, then the minister could steal as much as he wanted because he's also allowed to have nice things, right? They don't even get outraged by the fact that our presidents are millionaires, that our ministers are millionaires. This is not a thing that bothers them. That's a cultural response. You see, we have a problem with that. I have a serious problem with the idea that a minister makes more than 2 million rands a year, and then the Minister of Finance comes out and says that the allowance of 800,000 rand for a car isn't enough. They're really struggling to get cars. You know, poor little guys. They're making over 2 million rand a year, and they're getting a free car worth 800,000 rand. But that's tough. They can't get good cars for 800,000 rand. So we're going to increase it to 1.1 million. You're already getting 2 million rand a year. Why the hell don't you just buy your own bloody car? Right? No one says that you have to drive around in a Mercedes or in a BMW. You can get a Volkswagen Polo, right? Like, no one's going to care if you're driving around in a black Volkswagen Polo. Why must you drive the most expensive car money can buy? Right? These are things that outrage me. But these are not things that outrage the majority of freedom fighters in this country. Because from their cultural perspective, the chieftain has always enriched himself. Right? The chief of the village has always taken what isn't his and what doesn't belong to him as a result of him being the chief. And so he's allowed to do this. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that every black person is okay with this. There are a lot of black people that are starting to look at the current system and saying, wait a second, I don't think that you should be that rich. I don't think that but this is something that is still developing in black culture, right? There are black people that are starting to look at the system and saying, wait, this doesn't seem okay to me. But I have had numerous conversations with multiple black people where they genuinely don't mind it. From their perspective, the only thing they mind is the fact that they don't have money. How do you build a country with that? When you have these different groups that clearly have very different expectations and answers for fundamental problems. The answer is you can't, because we can't even agree on what is the most basic punishment for certain faux pas. Right? If someone breaks the law, what should be the rightful punishment for the laws that have just been broken? We can't even agree on that. And yet we're being asked to accept it. We're being asked in this country to just let go of our cultures and accept the majority culture, because apparently that majority culture is better. And again, you'll hear the freedom fighters in South Africa. They will go on and on about how they are superior and how they are so much better than white people. I see these posts literally every single day on X. And then you ask the question, okay, if you guys are so much better than white people, why do you need all of these laws, right, that give you an unfair advantage over white people? If you are better, you don't need the laws, right? You'll be able to do it by yourselves, but then there's all sorts of reasoning for it. Very fundamentally, we are, I believe, coming to the end of the Rainbow Nation. I believe that in the very near future, the cultures of South Africa is going to tear this country apart. And I believe that you will inevitably end up with a federalized system, or at the worst, a balkanized system. But I don't see a world in which this can continue, because diversity is, in fact, not a strength. As much as they like to pretend that it really isn't. There is no strength in everyone pulling in their own direction. This just doesn't work, right? You can use basic examples. If you had a team pulling rope, right, tug of war, if you had on one team one guy pulling this way and the other people are pulling this way, that is not conducive to a strong tug of war team. Everyone has to be pulling in the same direction, following the same rhythm, if you're going to do tug of war correctly. Same is true for a country. If everyone can't agree, and this isn't a racial thing, because again, if you think that it's only black people who don't have a problem with corruption and don't really mind that their leaders are stealing, what they mind is that they're poor. And if the government could just make them not poor, then the leaders could be stealing as much as they want. You're out of your mind. Go look at Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe is white. And you wouldn't leave your bike outside in Eastern Europe. You wouldn't leave your car unlocked in Eastern Europe, right? Their leaders are just as corrupt. And most of the people in Eastern Europe accept that, because for thousands of years, their rulers have been ultra corrupt, and the people have just learned to accept it, provided those rulers fulfill the basic necessities. They allow the leaders to be corrupt, right? They only really make noise when those leaders are just incompetent on top of being corrupt. So ultimately, this isn't a racial thing. This is just a cultural thing. And it is going to exist. I don't know till when. Right? I don't know how long it's going to take. There are certain movements that I think are gathering speed here in South Africa, like the conservative movement. You're getting more and more coloreds and Indians and black people joining the conservative movements here in South Africa. And that could ultimately have a serious impact on this sort of mindset. But for now, that is the mindset that we are stuck with. So I'd be interested to know what you guys think of that theory. Do you agree or disagree? What do you guys think? Black people living and leasing Ngunyama Trust land are unhappy. Karan, how you doing? Americans are thought of as talkative and friendly, saying hello to strangers, by contrast to Europe, especially Nordic countries. Europeans hate pointless small talk between strangers. Uh, Inc., as I said, it would depend on every single state, right? I can't answer that. I know Europeans are just as bad because I see a lot of Germans here and they also don't like saying hello. The Germans are very just doing their own thing here in Cape Town. But I know friends, I have a few friends that went to America and they all sort of have the same complaint, not complaints even, just sort of realizations of how different cultures react. What is your perspective on the difference between values versus culture? Because the coffee thing seemed more like a values thing because that's how you're raised. Yeah, but Dylan, values are derived from culture. Values do not exist in a vacuum, right? So your values will very much be determined by your culture. So the way I would view it, is as follows. At a baseline, it starts with faith, right? And we can see the difference between Christian nations and non-Christian nations in terms of how the cultures are affected, right? We can see the difference, how the cultures set themselves up. So I believe that Christianity, or faith rather, is the starting point, because faith will have an impact on everything that follows as a result of that, right? Faith is the starting point. Then you get the culture. The culture is, as he said, their modalities. So these are models that are built up by society on how we view things. So these are concepts that is established. In other words, do not steal or do not take unfairly what does not belong to you. That is a model that is sort of established within the culture. And then it doesn't matter where this applies, I can apply the model to it. So, for example, I can be in a sports match and, the guy hit the ball on the line in tennis. The ball was clearly in, but the umpire calls it out. And the model through which I view the world, so the culture, the model that was built, tells me that I am not allowed to gain what I did not earn or what does not belong to me. And as a result of this, I go and I say, sir, it was in. It was on the line. It's his point, right? He got it in. But it's that model through which I view the world. Then you get models and cultures where this isn't a model, or at least the model is set up in such a way that it's a weakened model. And so they might actually let that slip and think, oh, lucky me, right? It all starts with culture. Values flow from culture. Values are the things that we sort of tie together once the culture is established. But culture comes first. And then from that, all things flow. At least that is my viewpoint on it. So why does the SA taxpayer contribute to the Zulu King's upkeep? Gordon, again, the dignity, traditional leadership. Take your pick. I mean, in my opinion, this is part of a bigger conversation. Why is the South African taxpayer contributing to the well-being of 30 million parasites? Why does every single South African taxpayer, why is it our job to pay for the millions of people that don't have jobs? Why? Right? It's the same idea. Their dignity is important. It's like, hell no. Why don't they work? Oh, because the government is incompetent. Well, why are they supporting an incompetent government? Right? This is not my job. I should not be forced to pay for them. And yet I am consistently forced to pay for them. And if I refuse, I go to jail. Because how dare I not want to spend my money? And this is an interesting question, right? Because when you think of the social safety net, and if you think of Christianity, There are a lot of people that will immediately point out to you that a social safety net or socialism is not only compatible with Christianity, but it almost is demanded by Christianity, which of course is complete bullwash. The Christianity at no point demands socialism, but the arguments that is oftentimes made is interesting to entertain, right? Jesus does call upon us to take care of the poor, right? Jesus does call upon us to help the widows and to help the sick and the lame and to serve, right? This is what we are called as Christians to do. And so what the socialist says is, look, there are too many poor people and too many suffering people for us to be doing that for each and every one. So all we're doing is we're saying to the government, how about you guys do that? Right? How about you guys take care of the poor and we all will just contribute to the system? And then if you say no, the socialist will point out, well, didn't Jesus say you must take care of the poor? And the argument to this is an interesting one, and it's an interesting philosophical argument. Because Jesus also says that let him who is able work so as to not be a burden on his brothers. Paul actually goes a bit further when Paul says, he who does not work does not eat. So there's a clear contradiction here. Jesus says, take care of the poor, but also he who does not work does not eat. But you see, the reason this isn't a conflict and isn't a contradiction is because most leftists today do not understand who the poor were in ancient Israel. The poor in ancient Israel weren't just people who didn't want to work. The vast majority of poor in ancient Israel were people who were suffering from leprosy, people who were blind or lame, people who physically could not work. Because remember, you're in ancient Israel, right? There are no office jobs, as it were, except if you're a tax collector. But for the most part, you were working with your hands. You were doing physical labor, fishermen, and so on. So if you couldn't walk, there's nothing that you could do, right? And so these were people who weren't there by choice. They were there by circumstance. That's just how it was. Taking care of those people, I think no one really has a problem with that. But more importantly, we have to also ask ourselves, are you actually, and this is a conversation that I had years ago when I was still doing gaming content, are you actually helping poor people by giving them money? Because I'll tell you guys this, and maybe there's some of you that might agree with this or disagree with this, and I'd be happy to read your disagreements and we can debate it if you want. I am yet to meet a poor person, and by poor, I don't mean someone that just doesn't have a lot of money, right? Because being rich is luck as much as it is anything else. And there's plenty of research that actually proves that there is no 12 rules for life on how to be successful. There are no books that you can buy that will guarantee that you're rich. Most of it is down to right time, right place, right? If you're a Christian, you know that it is the Lord that decides, for reasons that are unknown to us, who gets to make money and who doesn't. We don't know this, but the Lord allows it to rain on the righteous and the unrighteous alike. I'm talking about people who are on the streets. I have not met a single hobo in South Africa who lives on the streets because of a lack of money. Not a single one. I have not met a single person living in a shack in South Africa because of a lack of money. I see how the poor in South Africa spend their money. I see the things that they buy and the things that they do. I see the things that they prioritize. And I look at it and I go, that's not smart. So now the question is, am I actually helping you by giving you money? Or would I be helping you more if I didn't give you money? And that's really the issue with what I believe is the socialist system. To answer your question, the idea that we're giving to the kings of the Zulu money and the idea that we're giving to the 30 million parasites in the country money, all we are doing is exacerbating the very system that keeps them poor. We are feeding into the problem the very poison that is destroying it. Because the truth is that the 30 million parasites would rise up and dismantle the ANC overnight if they suddenly went hungry, which by rights they should do. By rights, if you don't work, what the hell justifies you taking my money? What, you stood in a queue outside the post office and somehow you're entitled to a portion of my cash? No. See, but thanks to our compliance, and I would almost say our, what's the right word? The opposite of courage, our cowardice. Because of our cowardice, we have allowed the ANC to effectively remain in power far longer than what they ever should have. This is a government that has proven itself to be beyond incompetent. By every metric, had the ANC existed in a different period in time, the poor would have eaten them already. And yet they remain in power. Why? Because we keep giving. We keep giving because it's comfortable. It's better than dealing with the issues. And by this, I'm not even talking about individuals, because individual taxpayers have very little power. But corporations have the power to say no to the ANC. And not even necessarily in taxes. I'm not even saying don't pay your taxes. But individual corporations have the ability to say to the government, no, we will not support BEE. We will not support your affirmative action nonsense. And if you don't like it, take me to court. I will tell the court the same thing I'm going to tell you. No. You can't arrest all of us. And if every single business did that, the ANC would be done. There would be no ANC left. And yet, now, of course, I have to say, don't suddenly stop paying your taxes. This would be a very stupid move. You will get arrested. They will take you to jail. But I can see a world in the very near future. And this should not be seen as a suggestion, but a warning, because that's genuinely what it is. There will come a time in the near future where the people of South Africa will decide as a collective, we're done. We're not interested in supporting this anymore. And when that happens, what's the ANC going to do? I mean, what are they going to do? They don't have the police or the military to stop what will come next. Because when 30 million people go down to the post office to cash their 350 Rand SASSA grant, and the post office has to go, well, we don't have it. What do you think happens that same day? It'll be chaos. That's what happens. Chaos. And what this is in reference to, the ANC, is this about South Africa? Black Mesa Cake, how you doing, sir? Yeah, we were talking about South Africa. If a socialist says that, then the question should immediately be, doesn't socialism state that religion is simply the opium of the masses? why quote something you don't believe in. So Dylan, I'm perfectly okay with owning, right, the socialists, because they are stupid, and so I think you're allowed to do that. Um, but I also think that there's value in meeting the disagreements where they are, right? Um, and in this case, I do think that some of the disagreements that we have here in South Africa, especially between socialists and ordinary people, are disagreements that you should make the full case for it, right? Rather than just own them and be like, "Why are you quoting my Bible to me when you're not a Christian?" Uh, it bears laying out why socialism is the problem. Socialism isn't the problem because it takes care of the poor. If the government actually took care of the poor and helped the poor no longer be poor, all of us would be in favor of socialism. I don't know about you guys, but nothing drives me more up the wall than stopping outside a shop and suddenly you have 5 or 6 homeless people begging for money. It drives me insane. My immediate thought is just leave me the hell alone. Like I don't have enough money to give to every single one of you. And it happens at every single store, especially here in Cape Town. It's insane. It is insane. There are some garages in some places that you just don't go to here. Because as soon as you're out of your car, there's this, and they've gotten very smart. And I sincerely hope that you guys have caught up on this. So there's this garage close to my house where sometimes late at night we'll go down, especially on weekends, because weekends is a bit of a cheat day for me. So I'll drive down to the garage, right? Let's say 8 o'clock. You go get a coffee, and maybe like a muffin or something, and you walk in. You can see the poor person sitting there, right? You can see the poor person sitting right there. They don't say anything. So you walk in, you get your coffee, you get your muffin, you pay. As you walk out, they go, "Do you not have a bread for me? Can you just buy me a loaf of bread?" So now you have to think, why did you saw me walk in? Why did you wait until I came out for you to ask that question? And it takes like 2 seconds to go, oh. Because you understand the likelihood of me walking back in to go buy a loaf of bread is quite low. I'm rather just going to give you $10. And you really just want the money because you're going to go buy drugs with it. And I got my answer one day as I'm coming out. This guy asks me, "Can you just buy me a loaf of bread, please? I'm very hungry. I haven't eaten in, I don't know." They always make up some amount of days that they haven't eaten for. And so I look at the guy and I go, "Yeah, sure." And I turn around and I walk into the garage and I go and I buy a loaf of bread and I buy him some cold meat, just like a pack of bologna. I get outside, he's gone. He left. Because he wasn't interested in the loaf of bread and the bologna. He was hoping I would give him money. And as soon as he saw I wasn't going to give him money, he decided to pack up and go. Because why the hell would he be here? I would almost argue that, and this is up to every single person. You have to make that decision for yourself. But if I may suggest something to all of you, stop giving beggars money. And I'm going to talk to the ladies in chat right now. You are the most egregious offenders of this. I love you all, right? And your capacity for empathy is amazing. But in this instance, you have to fight your natural urge to feel sorry. Don't give beggars money. If you see someone and you genuinely feel for them, go buy a loaf of bread and give them the bread. I don't believe you're helping them by giving them money, because the vast majority of those kids are either working for some syndicate that takes most of the money that they make anyways, or they're buying drugs with it. So you are, in effect, helping them be addicted to whatever drug it is. So if you could just do that, right? If we could all just stop giving them money, that would already be a way to, I would argue, that would probably already be a way to rebel against this government. Because if the poor suddenly woke up and realized no one's giving me money anymore, well, they're going to need to get that money from somewhere. Think of it this way. Every single time you give one of these guys that stand on the street corner $5, that's a vote for the ANC. You've just ensured that the ANC remains in charge. But with the 10 community subs, thank you, sir. You are far too kind. Ladies and gentlemen, can we get some hearts in chat? For Pet, 10 community subs. Really appreciate that. Your support, guys, is what allows me to do what I do. So truly, very much appreciate you. Thank you so much, Pet. I'm not giving a single cent to any beggar. I had enough of begging and the attitude we owe them something. Oh yeah, very, very true. The Good Shepherd, how you doing? Like, that's the thing that drives me most insane. Reinhard, how you doing, sir? So community subs, if you look below the chat box, you will see that there is like a dollar sign. And if you click on the dollar sign, there's like super chat, which is you just making a one-off donation. And then there's membership. I believe there's a join button as well below the stream. If you click on that join button, you join the channel as a member. Members get early access to all of my videos. So when I upload a video 8 or 9 hours beforehand, you'll be able to watch the video. And every once in a while, I'll have videos that I don't make public, but that's rare. I try to make all of my videos for everyone, not just for members. But community subs or memberships is just someone said, hey, I want all of you to get membership. And so they gave memberships as a gift to 10 people in the community. In this case, Pitt decided to pay money so that 10 people could see videos earlier. So that's what they are. These guys that beg next to the road can make a decent living doing that as well. The one dude mentioned to me, he made about 900 to 1,000 rand a day. Dude, they make a lot of money. And they all keep voting for the ANC because there's no actual downside. Right? They can vote for the ANC and they get money. So, no problems. I genuinely want people to start realizing every single time you give money to these people, you are voting for the ANC. Effectively, you're giving the ANC a vote. The poor is one hell of a vehicle. Like, getting the poor to actually abandon the ANC is the best way for us to get rid of the ANC. And man, do I want... Guys. The arrogance of this ANC. This is again on my X account that sadly I can't show you guys because, I'm still waiting to be unsuspended from X. But Fikile Mbulula he has a new trend where he uploads videos to his X account of him arriving at meetings and him walking down the hallway. And he always walks like Mr. Big Shot, just like strutting his stuff. And then the camera, he walks past the camera as if the camera isn't even there. Like he's living in his own little movie. And he is the action figure, the big star of the movie. And he walks past the camera, not looking at the camera because he's a man on a mission. Right. And then he greets someone outside some or other meeting or whatever. Right. And he's like, greeting them and he's playing Mr. Big Shot. I look at him, I look at Cyril Ramaphosa, I look at the SONA. Do you guys remember the SONA? Where our ministers and politicians arrive on the red carpet for the State of the Nation address as if they're celebrities, as if these people are worth celebrating. You see, but they've made themselves into celebrities. They've turned themselves into these big shots that just, the dresses they wear. They're hoping that someone on the red carpet asks them, "And who are you wearing today?" This hubris. And the hubris exists because of people being too cowardice to actually just say, no. No, I'm sorry, but you don't get to use me in order to stay in power. There's a video that's doing the rounds currently on X. If I could get into X, I would show you, but I can't. But there's a video on X that it's Crumble. You guys remember Crumble, the guy with the headband or the bandana, whatever the hell you call those things. And he makes the argument. He says, "I never understand why you Afrikaners are complaining so much. You have the best schools in the country are Afrikaans. The best universities in the country are Afrikaans. You guys have every privilege in this country. What more do you want?" And I watched that. And I thought to myself, we built that. Those are our universities. Those are our schools. We built them. What's stopping you from building your own? All of the cadres, literally all of the cadres, with their millions of rands being extracted from the economy, money that they did not earn or deserve. Not a single school, not a single university. Name the thing that the ANC has built in this entire 30 years, 32 years now of freedom. Name a thing. Every single one of those ministers are millionaires. Did Cyril Ramaphosa build a school? Did he come together, with his nephew or his cousin or whatever the hell, Patrice Motsepe is of him and actually build a university for black kids? No. Building nothing and then demanding that what was built by others must be given to them, and then criticizing us for building things that actually work. Criticizing the minority for building things that actually work. And then saying, what more do you want? It's like, well, how about you leave us alone? If you look at what conservatives are doing in this country, black and white, FYI, and you look at the success that conservatives in this country are achieving with the boots of the ANC on their necks, imagine what the hell we could do if the ANC just lifted their boot. Imagine if the ANC just lifted their boot from the necks of hardworking Christian conservatives in this country. Imagine what they could build. Imagine what we could put together and build. But instead, it's just parasites upon parasites upon parasites. Nothing ever gets built. Nothing. There is literally zero effort from this government to develop the skills of their own people. Zero. It is genuinely the thing that is the most baffling to me. There is a golden opportunity in this country for a black businessman to open trade schools. Open a trade school. where young black kids can actually go learn a trade, learn how to be a plumber, learn how to be an electrician, learn how to be a fitter, learn how to be a millwright, learn how to be something that this country desperately needs. We need tradesmen. And yet, not a one. But AfriForum built one. Solidarity built Soltech. AfriForum is building their own university. Where is the black equivalent of that? Now, in a perfect world, I would actually want to see white and black build together. Right? In a perfect world, that is what I would like to see. I would prefer if we don't have white universities or black universities or white trade schools or black, but just universities and trade schools. I understand the Afrikaans version of that. I understand that AfriForum wants a university that is Afrikaans. And so I respect that. And I think that matters, right? That is super important. But I also understand the Afrikaners' perspective on saying, it's not, you are already stealing my money. I refuse to also do your job for you. I will not build a university for your people because, well, you don't even want to build a university for your people. But then when I build one for my people, because you refuse to build anything for my people as well, you want to take that too. Because how dare you? This is such a racist thing. The Section 235 change in the Constitution. Make no mistake. The ANC is passing that because Oranje makes the ANC look bad. Ordinary South Africans can look at Oranje and go, wait, are you telling me that you can have a town in South Africa where crime literally doesn't exist? You can have a town in South Africa where there's no load shedding, there's no poverty, the people, the children go to school and they walk around safely at night and there's just no problems. This is a severe problem for the communists in South Africa. Because from their perspective, the destruction, the crime, the downtrodden nature of this country, that what can you do? That's Africa. It's part of the charm of living in Africa. You know, not entirely sure if at the end of the day you're still going to be alive. When you get into your car, you go, am I going to make it? Am I not? You know, who knows? Let's flip a coin and see. Right? According to the ANC, this is what it means. You know, it's part of the rush. It makes you stronger to live in a country where you're not entirely sure what's going to happen every single day. Everything is under attack because communists cannot build, they can only destroy. And that is why South Africa is where it is. Because the communists have run out of things to destroy. There's nothing left. And the little that there is, they have run out of ways to destroy. So now we're just on this sort of treadmill to nowhere, where things just fall apart ever more. And if we had 50 more years, I believe the ANC would run out of black people to vote for them as well. Not because black people die. Black people would abandon the ANC and communism. 50 more years. Because we're actually seeing it. As black kids are going through school and going to university, a lot of those black kids are no longer supporting the ANC. Most of those black kids are moving to parties like the DA. You even now have black kids that are moving to the Freedom Front Plus, telling you that there is a movement among black kids in South Africa who are educated going, this doesn't really look like my cup of tea. I'm not that fond of this whole communist idea. So if we had 50 more years, we'd probably have a peaceful transition of power. Well, as peaceful as it can be. But I don't know. I don't think we have 50 more years. When I look at the state of this country, when I look at the state of everyone's finances, I don't know how many people can still exist. And so when Krookamp asks, what more do you want? I think most white people and most conservatives in South Africa are sick and tired of just surviving. In every other country, the debates are about thriving. You know, young kids want to know when are they going to be able to buy their own homes. Um, People are debating that 3 weeks of holiday is enough. You need more. In South Africa, the vast majority of people are asking only to survive. Thriving is not even a question. That's not even a discussion. You know, you look at. I live in a fairly big, like holiday town where I remember the very first year I moved here. Um, this was 2021. This place was packed. Guys, you couldn't drive, you couldn't go anywhere. It was a nightmare. Now, just a short 4 years later, because I arrived in 2021 December, 5 years later, if we're going to be pedantic about it, December's isn't that busy. Not anymore. It's busier than normal, but not that much busier. Which tells me that most people don't really have the money to even go on holiday anymore. We're no longer debating, 1 or 2 holidays a year. Most people now are debating whether or not they would be able to take at least one holiday a decade, if that. That's what we're tired of. We're tired of just surviving. Especially when we know that if you guys disappear tomorrow, we'd be thriving. Rue, how you doing? Collection agencies are on my ass because I can't afford anything else other than food and rent and water and lights. Rue, you're not the only person I know that has gone through that. I will say though, the best advice I can give to someone who is in a world of debt, right, up to their eyeballs in debt, make an arrangement. Most companies will take whatever you can give them over getting nothing at all. So if you go to all of your debt the companies that you owe, and you tell them, look, I can give you $20 a month. That's it. I don't have more. I physically can't give you more. They'll end up taking that $20 because at least it's something. It gets them off your ass. It gets you in a position where you can start planning and hopefully, make up for some of that debt. But yeah, I would say don't postpone because that's when you get into the biggest problems because they will not leave you alone. I'm so broke I can't even afford to pay attention. Bandit, how you doing, sir? I haven't taken a holiday in more than 20 years. I don't take holidays often. Like I will do stuff like this weekend. Where I'll take I'll take the weekend off. But very rarely will I go on holiday. I don't really see the point of going on holiday. I like what I do. My job's quite fun, so I don't really feel like I need to go on holiday. So read to us from the Cook and Geniet. What if for that's just you, that's not true. Like I get that we're now playing the game of who's poorer, but that's just not true. I highly doubt I find it suspicious. I'm suspicious of your story. Someone asked why was I banned. Who asked why was I suspended on X? No, someone asked, but yeah, because I wrote this. I guess when I shared it, not that many people had joined the stream yet. I wrote to the Iranian government or the Iranian embassy after they made a post basically saying that President Trump is the most hated man in the world and that the whole world is wishing for his downfall. And I responded and I said, I promise you, far more people are wishing for your demise than his. And X thought, wow, call to violence. Um, and I appealed it. And I'm stubborn like that. So I'm going to wait for them to actually admit that they are liars, and that there's no call to violence in any of this, right? The only thing that annoys me and what will ultimately force me to probably delete the post is a lot of the work that I do, I require X for. So that's a bit annoying. I find not having access to X quite annoying for work. Like I don't know, I would have to go look at the mainstream media after this to see if there's any actual news, and then you guys know how the media is in South Africa. It's not going to be true, and then I don't have X to double check. Um, so it creates some problems on the work front, but we'll figure it out. And I don't know how long I'm suspended for, as long as it takes for them to actually see that this isn't a call to violence. I'm not threatening anyone with violence. Nah, I don't. We are. I'm not that dependent on X for answering. Hope your day is doing good. Oh, JM, how you doing, sir? Well, thanks for asking. And yeah, my day's doing very well. We are. I mean, from a work perspective, it's a little annoying, but it's not the end of the world, right? Um, I, I, I must admit, I have a love hate relationship when it comes to X. When I see the leftists on X, I genuinely sometimes think, man, I should delete this bloody app. It just makes me angry. Uh, but then again, sometimes it's funny, so you sort of have to go with it and just accept, I guess. I stopped all my interaction on X 2 years ago. Life is better after that. Just monitor. Marius, the only reason I have to continue, um, you know, sort of engaging on X is because it's work, right? And it's content. But if I wasn't a content creator, I can guarantee you right now, I would not be on X. I would not set foot on X. It's a terrible place. It's a terrible, terrible place. And Elon Musk may have increased freedom of speech, but there's still fundamental errors on X that I don't see him doing much about. You know, so hopefully he'll get to fixing that at some point. Um, for his interview, we'll do a rewatch later. Lucinda, thank you so much for hanging out, though. Really appreciate you. And yeah, enjoy him. Enjoy Colonel Chris Wyatt. Always fun. I will probably listen to him as well. We're almost done here, anyways. About 7 more minutes. I just always like answering some questions and having some interaction with you guys. Because a big part of why I do these live is so that I can talk to you. I could probably sit here and keep myself busy for 2 hours and just upload the podcast. But I like doing it live because, well, I get to see in real time what you guys think. And so, that's very valuable to me. A girl named Van, how you doing? I'm so afraid of saying anything on X or any social media platform, afraid of getting cancelled for someone taking what I said out of context and getting cancelled. Peterson, like, it is impossible to cancel anyone. You can't cancel someone. Every single person that they've tried to cancel, it backfired. The person became more famous. Oh, excuse me. The person became more famous as a result of the cancellation. And so I understand that normal people, a lot of normal people, you have jobs, right? You have bosses. And the last thing you want is to be called out, right? The last thing you want is to be made a pariah, right? Losing your job for most of you will be the end, right? Like, and especially here in South Africa, many companies will refuse to hire you because of politics. So I understand that. And to those people, if you are one of those people who you're not speaking out because you're afraid of the consequences, I understand that. And I will never be one of those people that tell you you must speak out. I don't believe that you should take chances, especially not with your life, not with your livelihood. There are other ways in which you can rebel, right, without necessarily having to speak out. This is going to sound incredibly self-serving, but I don't mean it to be. Please don't feel compelled. But there are ways in which you can support people like myself, people like Ronaldo Gous or Willem Petzer, by becoming part of the membership, or by donating, or even just by sharing the videos and liking the videos. These are all ways in which you can serve and help your country without necessarily putting your own head on the chopping block, right? And because I obviously have a lot more freedom to, at least for now, say what I want to say and not get into trouble because, well, I work for you guys. So as long as what I say doesn't chase every single one of you away, I'm fine, right? I can say what I want to say. But if you have a boss, obviously that changes things considerably. Because you have to think, what if I get fired? Maybe you have a wife, maybe you have children, maybe there's something. So yeah, please don't ever let someone bully you into risking your livelihood. Your well-being and your family's well-being must come first. You guys know the old age saying, charity begins at home. There's no point in speaking up for what you believe in and then your wife and your children suffer as a result of this. That's not how it works. There's only one thing in this world that we are called to defend to that degree, and that's the kingdom of God. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the reason we can defend the gospel of Jesus Christ even unto our lives is because God is in control. And God says that he makes everything work out for good for those who believe in him, for those who are called according to his purpose. So we know that it will always be good no matter what. It might not always look that good for us, but it is always good, right? And it's going to work out for good. But for everything else, if you can't afford it, don't do it for politics. Politics is just a game at the end of the day. And it's rigged because the people in power rigged it. So yeah, don't risk your lives on that. Karen, I wonder about your accent ancestry. Only learned you're now Christian. I love you don't force your beliefs down viewers' throats. Also Christian, but can't find a church, building, or clergy. Karen, where are you in the country, if you don't mind me asking? Because where I am, there's a couple of really good churches. But yeah, okay. So my accent's completely broken. My accent is broken, right? In terms of my ancestry, I am German in ancestry, but my family arrived here in 1838 on my father's side, and then on my grandmother's side, they arrived in 1901, also from Saxony, Germany. So long time ago. I was born here, but my accent's broken. My accent's broken because I've spent the majority of my life speaking to non-South Africans for like 16 hours a day. So it sort of turned into a whole host of things. 1 and 4, bye bye what? If you never stand for anything, you stand for nothing. We are, yes, but also at the same time, if you go on X and you just start posting a bunch of random stuff, right? That then gets you fired and maybe let your whole family end up homeless. What good did that actually do? Right? Like, what difference did you actually make there? We should speak out against unrighteousness and against wickedness and evil. And in that sense, you have to call it out when you see it. But if we're just talking about corruption from the ANC, I think, it is what it is. 1 and 4, take care of yourself, man. Enjoy Colonel Chris Wyatt's live stream. People like to complain, but does not do anything about it. That's his point. This is worrying about something and stressing. I think the better saying is, if you tolerate everything, you stand for nothing. Banner, that is also very true, of course. How am I contradicting? There's nothing. I am not contradicting myself in any way, shape, or form, right? Because you can get involved without risking yourself. I am not suggesting that you don't get involved, but I am saying don't get involved stupidly. So, for example, right? Maybe you have a job and a career and your company is quite left wing. So you can't go on X and post a bunch of stuff because you will most likely lose your job. But you can go to Ronaldo Goos and subscribe to him and become a member for 50 or 100 Rand a month. And through that, you can enable Ronaldo Goos to actually fight the fight on your behalf, right? Or you can get involved with AfriForum or with Solidarity or with Sakeliga. So you don't have the ability to fight these things, but you can enable others to fight on your behalf that allow it for you, or allow for you to ultimately still be part of the fight, even though you yourself can't risk it. Now, when it comes to COVID, right? Let's talk about COVID because it's a very recent example. I never got vaccinated. I refused. From day one, I refused to get vaccinated. I have family members who got vaccinated because their jobs were threatened. Was I angry when they got vaccinated? Yes, because their vaccinations ultimately allowed the government to force me to need to get vaccinated, even though I ultimately just said no, right? But because some people submitted, others suddenly found an increased amount of pressure being applied to them to also submit because some have already submitted. But I also understand that my job was never at risk. YouTube never came and said, we require a vaccination certificate or else you're not going to be allowed to work, right? Never. So I could stand on principle and say, hell no. I could do that. My family members couldn't. If they didn't get the vaccination, their careers and lives would have been over. Because each of the family members that did get the vaccination work in fields where there's no other alternatives. I'll give you an example. Someone I know very well, not a family member, but someone that I know very well, is an estate agent. Just after the sort of separation, the whole social distancing thing ended and people were allowed to go out again. So this guy actually resisted getting vaccinated for a long time. And then the economy started opening up again. And every single client that he would be on the phone with would ask him just one question: are you or are you not vaccinated? And every single time he said, I'm not, they said, okay, thank you, I'll phone someone else. Now, what do you do here? Like, what exactly should you do here? Your livelihood is at play here, right? Like, you're going to lose everything. And your career, no matter which company you go and work for as an estate agent, the customers are going to do the exact same thing. Are you or are you not vaccinated? Because we won't see someone who isn't vaccinated. So that's a serious problem. I have another friend who works in healthcare. It was the policy of every single hospital in South Africa that everyone must be vaccinated. Even if you said, I'm not going to do it, you're not going to find another hospital with a different policy. They all followed the same policy, right? And so I get that there are people who are willing to stand on principle and just say, no, I will lose everything. I will go down with the rubble, but I will not. And there is something to be said for the bravery of such people. But I will also not sit here and judge those people who do not have that level of bravery. And there's also something to be said. There's a massive difference between someone who is single, willing to risk everything, and someone who has a family, who now has to think about his wife, his kids, their lives. And it's not just something that he can or cannot do. Anthony Mitchell, we are at war. Actions speak louder than words. If the house next door is on fire, move, don't watch. We are in agreement about making noise versus rising up. Well, we are, as I say to you, there are various different ways, because all of these people I just told you about, all of them that did get the vaccine, all of them paid money to the individual civil rights groups that were fighting the government to stop it becoming mandatory. So while they bent the knee in one angle, right, getting the jab, they still paid money to the civil rights groups that were fighting to stop the government from making it mandatory for every single person in the country. So they were still part of the fight, but they had to pick their battles. Only a fool fights every single battle there is. Because if you fight every single battle, you're going to be done before the war is over. And this is a long war. We have to accept that. We're not going to defeat the forces of the left overnight. Right? We're not going to just wake up one morning and they're all gone. This is going to be a long fight. And you sometimes have to lose the battle in order to win the war. That's why picking your battles is clever. Just don't just go tilting at windmills and thinking, well, I'm going to fight every single thing. If you had opinions, your hands are tied. Ridge Walker, how are you doing, sir? People did what they thought they needed to do. No condemnation on those who got the jab. I did not. No, I think I'm always careful, right? Not to just condemn actions, right, from ordinary people, because it's very difficult. You're not in that situation, right? You're not finding yourself in that situation. And so you have the luxury of being able to look objective, right? And now, especially now, we have the luxury of hindsight. We can look back and go, well, it was clear that this wasn't going to succeed and that they wouldn't be able to force everyone. You shouldn't have done it. But that's with hindsight being 2020. At the time, there was a very reasonable belief that the government will not open the economy until every single person is vaccinated. Right? There was a very reasonable belief that this is exactly what would have happened. And so you can understand why a lot of people were like, well, what am I supposed to do? I need to get back to work. We're already running low on funds. I'm just going to get the bloody jab and get it over and done with, right? Because I just need the economy to be open now. Left descendants, don't hide behind that. The entire country needs a reshuffle. You and me too, and have a role to play. You're kicking the can. In what way am I kicking the can? We are. My face is on the internet. I'm not just posting randomly, anonymously on X. My face is here. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm not kicking any cans down the road. I am taking the risk and I am allowing the attacks to come to me. Right? I'm saying the things that so many people want to say but can't say. And I'm happy to do that. Right? This is something that I've wanted to do. It is something that I believe I'm called to do. So I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm also not kicking any cans down the road. I am willing to fight. But every war has different soldiers. Not everyone is on the front lines. Not every war is fought in the trenches. Wars have funders. Wars have battle masters. Wars have planners. There are even people who work in logistics. And the war requires that as well. My point is, don't criticize people who fight in one way but don't fight in another, right? You get people who, on the surface, it looks like this person is just going along to get along. But you don't know, they might be giving thousands of rands every single day or every single month to civil rights organizations that fight the government tooth and nail. That's their way of fighting. That's what they can offer. Right? They can't offer speaking out, but they can offer that. And thanks to that, people like Sakeliga, people like Solidarity, people like AfriForum is able to tie up the government in court for months, if not years, right? These are all, like, every single war is going to have their fighters. And it's important that we don't just throw around accusations. Now, if we want to talk, I guess, if you want to talk theoretically, right? We are. So you want to say, but theoretically, Stefan, imagine you had a person who does not speak out, doesn't say a word, doesn't give any money, even though they have the ability to do so. They just go along. They just keep quiet. They complain to their friends where no one's watching, but they don't actually do something. In that regard, I agree with you. That is a coward. But since I don't know anyone like that, I don't know. I'm sure people like that exist, but I don't know anyone like that. The people that I know are all involved somewhere in the war, you know, even though they're not like openly involved in the war, they're somewhere. You can find somewhere where they connect. And sometimes it is something just as silly as watching a video and liking the video and sharing the video, or just watching, because the way the YouTube algorithm works, when you watch a video, it will go to other people that watch similar videos to you, and it will suggest that video to those people. So even that can be sort of, helping out, although I wouldn't say you're helping out, because, that's not why you're watching the video. You're watching the video because you want to watch the video. But I do think we have to be very careful. I informed my brother of the negative jab info. He ignored me and suffers minor health effects. We don't get on. He took his friend's side and stopped me from attending mom's memorial, not COVID related. Karen, I'm really sorry to hear that. And yeah, I think sadly COVID tore a lot of families apart. I still have a few family members. Inheritor, how you doing? I still have a few family members who still believe every word the government told them during COVID. Still, to this day, if you tell them that it came from a lab, they will straight up tell you you are a conspiracy theorist, even though almost all of the evidence proves that it came from a lab. We know it came from a lab, right? And yet, conspiracy theories. So, I know that too. Luckily, I'm not really the kind of guy like I will. You have to do a lot for me to break my relationship with you. I will, especially family, right? I have, I literally have a leftist uncle who hates what I do. Absolutely can't stand me. Will not watch me. Refuses. He's my uncle. I love him. Right? He's a pain in the ass, but I love him. So I usually have my fun with him. You can uh there's some funny things that you can do with him and he gets really angry. But yeah, it is what it is. Praises from Malaysia. Hope you're okay. Nothing much except fuel subsidy arguments in my country because it's becoming unsustainable. Oh, wow. I'm sorry to hear that, Orion. Yeah, we've had the government decided to make the tax a little bit less on fuel year. Friend of ours, 10 years old, was diagnosed with brain cancer after the really, Joe? Whoa, that's nuts. Knowing it can't be saved and restarting over because that's what makes you suffer out of your life. The best bandit, the best saying I've ever heard related to that is intelligence is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing that it doesn't belong in a fruit salad. I oftentimes think the government in South Africa lacks both intelligence and wisdom. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with that said, I'm happy that you and I have come to an agreement of sorts. I truly appreciate all of you for coming out, for hanging out, for spending time with me. I hope that you guys had fun. Um, Please remember that if you do want to talk to me, if you have something that you want to discuss, if there is something on your mind, you can message me on Discord. You can send me an email. You can contact me on X, although not right now because I am still suspended on X. But if you do, I will get back to you as soon as my suspension has been lifted. If you had a reset button, in which time would you go to reset? If I had a reset button. Ferorius, how are you doing, sir? I don't think I would reset anytime because all of the same mistakes would be made. I trust in the fact that every empire is better than the empire that predates it. And so, yes, things are rough right now and it looks crazy right now. But what comes next will be better than what was before. And will fix the systems and the brokenness of the system and will find safeguards against the things that broke the system in the first place. And that will lead us forward. And at some point, I know that it will be the final empire. And when that empire ultimately falls, Jesus will come back, Judgment Day will ensue, and then we will live in paradise, right? And life will be good because God will then be in control. And since I know that, I think I'm happy with where the world is, even though the world is completely crazy. I'm reading through Mark at the moment, the Gospel of Mark. And there's a couple of interesting things in Mark that has been sort of jumping out of me every single time I read the Old Testament, or the New Testament rather. When I read the Old Testament, I just find it fascinating. But every single time I read the New Testament, new things jump out of me. There's new truths that are revealed to me. Jesus takes a boat with his disciples to the other side. And while Jesus is asleep, a storm arises. And his disciples get frantic. And Jesus comes out and he says to the storm, "Be still." And the storm dies down immediately. And his disciples are amazed because only God can command the wind and the ocean. No man has this sort of power. And they ask, who the hell is this guy? How is he able to do this? And Jesus says, do you still lack faith? And as I sat there and I was thinking about this, meditating on this passage, it occurred to me, as humans, we understand that God is in control of all things, right? We understand that God is sovereign and his will is sovereign. We understand that right up until the moment that things go wrong. And then suddenly we panic. The God that we worship, however, is the creator of heaven and earth. Every problem in this world, he ordained. This is the God that can raise people from the dead. This is the God that has power over the wind, power over the oceans. And yet, we allow something as small as a problem in life to derail us. Instead of giving thanks, because we're told to give thanks to God in all things. Paul doesn't say give thanks to God when it's good or when the things are good. Paul says give thanks to God in all things. And something that I've learned in my life, looking back, last year when I just started making political YouTube videos, when I just swapped. So when I was making gaming videos, I was making between $1,000 and $2,000 a month, right? Just sort of, I was making good money. I wasn't rich, but I was getting by. Then I switched to politics, and it tanked hard. The views went up, but South African politics really doesn't pay well per 1,000 views. So where I used to get about almost $5 per 1,000 views, I would get like 60 cents per 1,000 views. So lots of views, not that much money. And my income tanked to around $600, $700 a month. That's what I made for like the first 4 months of doing South African politics. $600-$700 a month. That was tough. There were every single month. So for those 3 months, I had to come up with a new system. And the system would be, I wouldn't eat on Mondays and Tuesdays. I would hold those as fasting days, which I told myself was for religious reasons, but really it was because if I did that, I would only need to fast the last 4 days of the month before I get my new paycheck, and then I can afford to buy food again. That's literally how I had to do it. Just so that I could buy food for most of the month, I had to willingly fast. Now, luckily, fasting is actually quite healthy for you. So, my health certainly didn't complain, and my weight certainly didn't complain. I lost a lot of weight and been sort of in the process of continuing that. Um, but that was a tough period, and I kept praying, and I was like, God, I don't understand why am I struggling this much? Like, what's the point? What's the purpose? And I won't go into what the point and the purpose was, but there was one. Now that I look back at that time, and I'm still not rich, it's not like I make, even that much more than $1,000 a month, but I'm making enough now that I can actually survive. Um, but now I can look back at that period and I know what the purpose was. I know what I had to learn back then. I know the lessons that were there that I picked up and that has made me better as a result of it. Right? That period made me a better Christian than what I was beforehand, which is the entire point. It's to do with our eternal salvation. So always give thanks to God, even in bad times, knowing that He is ultimately in control and it'll work out. It might not make sense, you might not understand it, but I promise you it will work out. And you'll be better and happier for it. You're an emerging voice, changes on the horizon, keep pumping. Thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate that. But Jesus said, these you can do and greater, so why do we not trust and have faith that we all can do miracles? I have a couple of miracle healings, I believe was due to my earnest prayer, a few personal too. So, Karen, I believe God fits, because when you think about the miracles that was done, they served a purpose. The purpose of miracles is always to the advancement of the kingdom. God is not interested in our comforts. DZ, by the way, thank you so much for the 50 rand donation, dude. Really appreciate you. Thank you, sir. You are far too kind. Keep it going, Stefan. Number 6, 24 to 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. DZ, thank you so much. I truly appreciate you, sir. And I'll definitely go read that as well. Numbers 6, 24 to 26. The Lord isn't interested in our personal comforts over our eternal salvation. If it comes to a choice between riches or health or happiness and eternal salvation, God is always going to choose our eternal salvation over anything else. This weekend, I had the privilege of meeting a girl. She's 16 years old. Beautiful girl. The friendliest girl you'll ever meet. She is just smiling constantly, just always smiling, always joking and happy. And we're at their house, and I'm talking to her father, and her father tells me her story. Now, to be fair, when I say I met a girl, I literally just mean I met a girl, not I met a girl. That's not she's 16, she's a child, right? So none of that. I was invited by her mom and dad, along with a bunch of other people, to go spend Friday evening, Good Friday evening with them. And we sort of ended up talking Bible and just having fellowship, right? It's at their house. So she's a swimmer. Apparently one of the best in South Africa, or she was, before things went horribly wrong. She started having serious problems where after swimming, she would pass out. She would sometimes pass out and spaz out in the water. She would almost get epileptic attacks. It looked like she had epilepsy as a result of it, and it was all tied to her swimming. And she joined my gym, where my coach is a specialist in dealing with injuries and fixing injuries. And for a year almost, they could not find the problem. They were working on everything, they were trying everything, they could not find a problem. 17 doctors later, she can no longer swim because she can physically, she'll drown if she's doing it alone, and it puts her in a lot of pain, and she's constantly in pain. 17 doctors later, they finally get to a doctor that diagnoses her with a very rare form of, I can't pronounce this. You guys know the disease that the Hunchback of Notre Dame had? It's that disease, but what makes it rare is it's in her lower back. It's already rare for people to even have this, but this particular one is in her lower back. And the result is it's her lower back. Normal people have a slight curve. You have to have this kind of curve. Hers is completely straight as a result of this. So the sickness has physically forced the lower back to almost do this. So rather than be like this, it's being pushed like this. The Grey Hour, thank you so much for the 35 Rand. Really appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm just popping in to say hello and leaving also. You were on the money for New York. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, sir. And so when she got to this doctor, he was the first one to diagnose her with this problem. And they also found out that her back is broken. This disease has physically broken her back. And all of her problems are from this issue. When she sits down, she sits more straight than you can ever imagine someone sitting. And she's in constant pain. Like constant. Every single day of her life, she is in pain. She's an amazing swimmer that can never swim again. She's in constant pain, and yet if you see her, you will not know. Like, you'll physically not know. She smiles, she jokes, she laughs, and every once in a while, you'll see her go to the bathroom where she'll get composure. When the pain gets a little too much, she goes sit in the bathroom. She has a couple of exercises that she does to help her cope. And then she comes back, and again, you will not know. And I looked at this girl and I was like, Lord, I don't understand this. She's so young. What could there possibly be? My heart broke for her. I genuinely just I couldn't handle it. I don't know what the reason is, but I know there is a reason. I know there is a reason, and she knows it too. That was the amazing thing. That's why I told you this story. 16 years old, and she understands the Lord has a reason for this. And she accepts that his sovereign will is better than hers. He knows better. Dude, we don't know how good we have it until you see people that really struggle. Stephanie, how you doing? Appreciate your work. Thank you very much. I am 63-year white woman, and prayers for each other is essential. Truth will prevail. True, Stephanie. Absolutely true. Prayer is fundamental. I don't know if it's scoliosis or lepra. I just know her father said the word, and I went, what? And he was like, the same disease that the Hunchback of Notre Dame had. Kyphosis, that could actually have been it. That sounds familiar enough to me. But then again, I don't remember really. I just remember when her dad said the word, I was like, I don't know, I don't understand this. Like, whatever the hell that is, that makes no sense to me. But yeah, it's a sad one. So when you guys pray, please keep her in your prayers. When you're praying tonight, just pray for the 16-year-old swimmer that is struggling. if you don't mind. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be it for the stream. I'm already about half an hour over the stream, and every single time I go over 2 hours, there's people in the comment section going, dude, that's too long. 2.5 hours is too long. So I understand that if there's stuff that you missed, I will have the videos up so that you guys can watch the shortened clips of the stuff that we discussed today. I will have those up from tomorrow. Tomorrow morning is when I'll sit down and quickly edit all of those. So I truly appreciate all of you for coming out, for hanging out, for spending time with me, and for actually taking the time to be here. Really appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.